is so that we can make it available to you after the webinar is concluded. Along with this recording that we will provide access to, we will also be sharing the deck that I will be using in the next 90 minutes. As far as how we interact, we made a decision for this webinar where we would condense a lot of stuff into it so that we would really be able to give you the overall strategic arc of the 5 key areas for a successful sales enablement approach. Having said that, I will be stopping along the way to answer questions. If you want to interrupt me, for those of you who know me, I'm Israeli. I love being interrupted. So just unmute yourself and ask a question or write it in the text box. Even if I can't address all of the questions at once or throughout the webinar, we will be capturing all of these questions, and anything that I am unable to address today because of time constraints, I will make sure to address after it. So you will receive an email with the questions and the answers. Hello, Omer, welcome aboard. Anastasia, hello. I'm seeing that people are connecting still. And so it's going to be very packed. I'm going to be moving quickly. You should feel free to interrupt me at any point. The webinar today is going to be, we're going to begin with a theoretical introduction, and then for every one of the key areas that I talk about, we're going to have a general theoretical brief with some guiding principles and then some practical tools. Because the idea is to give you everything you need today to get started, to make it possible for you to go back to your company or to your organization and evaluate where you think you might want to improve a few things, and to make sure that you have the tools necessary to make that happen. And of course, after the webinar is over, if you have any additional questions, you should absolutely reach out, and we will be very happy to address those questions. So with that said, I'm going to jump right in. And I cannot talk about sales enablement without going back in time and looking at, we tried to look at what would be the most stereotypical image we could possibly find to the archetype of the salesperson. And obviously we went back in time. This was our favorite picture. This is classic sales in the early days. You'd have this salesperson go from village to village, from town to town. This guy is holding a potion and he is explaining to all the bald people around him, this potion will grow hair on your head, and this is what it's going to do for you. And and that was it. That was sales. And at the end of the day, when he was done, he'd walk away to the next town with money in his pocket, new clients on the horizon, and he may never visit that town again. And when we look at the evolution of sales over the last several decades, specifically looking at the impact the digital revolution has had on sales, we see that that picture is really not very much relevant anymore, certainly not in the realm of business-to-business commercial engagement. When we look at what has changed, we at least at Vayomar, have identified 4 major paradigm shifts that really need to be addressed. Some of this is already known to you, some may not be. The idea is that any approach, any approach to sales enablement should address these 4 paradigm shifts. And I'm thrilled to hear that we have on the phone. You can never start too early learning this kind of stuff. For those of you who have some noise in your background, you might want to put yourself on mute. What are the 4 paradigm shifts that we think should be at the core focus of any strategic approach to sales enablement? Well, number 1, we are no longer operating predominantly in a transactional reality. This person in the background on the donkey selling, what he's doing would be called transactional selling. He's there, they meet once, he doesn't ask too many questions, he mainly speaks, and when he's done, a transaction takes place. And that single transaction is the end of his relationship with that audience, at least pertaining to that magic potion that he has. That's not the case today. Today, salespeople have to be consultants. They have to know how to ask questions well before they know how to answer them about their product. And that's very, very important. Number 2, we are less and less seeing a world in which ownership changes hands. This person, when he's done, he will hand over that bottle in return for money. And the money he gets from every one of the bald people standing around him will represent 100% of his revenue and profitability from that individual upon closing of the deal. Today, in the digital world, we are selling access. In the sharing economy, we are selling access. In the world of software as a service, we are selling access. And what that means, beyond the fact that it's much, much harder to close the deal today, for reasons I will talk about later, at the end of the day, it means that the moment the deal is closed is not the moment of success from a profitability perspective. Today, we spend more time and more energy and more money getting a deal to close, and then the return on investment only begins because we are selling licensing and access, and that means that basically we need to continue retaining the customer for a long period of time. And only after that customer stays with us month to month, year to year, for a certain amount of time. Wait, I'm being asked to mute everybody. Let me take care of that. Mute all. Okay, I hope it didn't mute me. The minute we do that, we now have to wait and make sure that the client is happy. It's no longer just about selling a promise, it's about keeping a promise. And that, by the way, is much harder. And therefore, it's no longer the job of an individual hero to just get the deal signed. Today, we have multiple organizations, dozens of people across the organization, from marketing to sales to delivery to the pre-sale solution experts to all of these areas that all have to work together. Legal departments, procurement, accounting, all of them have to work together to keep the customer happy. And so this image of the single hero salesperson going from town to town, that doesn't work anymore. Now, that's why we chose to use the word village in this webinar. Because at the end of the day, when we look at our experience over the last, we've been around for 18 years, we've been doing intensive sales enablement work with companies for the past 5 to 7 years, with companies from multiple industries, different countries, different cultures, different product lines. What we have found is that even though every industry is different, and even though every industry has its own kind of way of doing business and the technologies are different, at the end of the day, these 4 paradigms are true across the board. And based on these paradigms, we've basically put together what we call a value dashboard. A value dashboard is a methodology we developed in order to create a single slide snapshot of any strategic process. And in this case, the value dashboard is being applied to the strategic process of putting together an enterprise-wide sales enablement approach, hence the word holistic and strategic. And so what I'm going to show you right now is what we have found to be the 9 universal success metrics of an organization when it pertains to the ability to sell and to meet revenue targets. And then, of course, I will show you the 6 obstacles that we have found to be universally relevant regardless of what company you come from. Now, where things change is in the ratios and the relevancy between these metrics, the exact numbers, the exact objectives. But every single company we've worked with, whether it's a hyper-growth startup or a large international corporation with tens of thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands of employees, at the end of the day, when you sit with the CEO and you ask that CEO, tell me, how are you going to measure success when it comes to sales? What she will tell us over and over again is, look, it's always going to be a combination of these 9 metrics. And when we sit with the executive leadership teams and we sit with the CRO and all these functions, we ask them, what is going to stand in your way? Where have you not succeeded in the past and why? What we've come together with is these 6 key obstacles. And some of them are obstacles that the company is causing itself. That's what we would call an internal obstacle. And some of them are obstacles that the company is dealing with environmentally. Together, these 6 obstacles are what we have to overcome and mitigate well in order to achieve any one or more of these 9 success metrics. And so with this in mind, let's quickly take a look at what are the solutions that we have to come up with. And again, I have to emphasize, I personally have a tendency to speak in absolute truths and exclamation marks. This is not an exact science. Not all of you are going to need every one of these 5 components. But again, we tried to create what would be an approach that would have the most universal appeal. And what we came up with were these 5 key solutions that companies need to pay attention to. And these solutions span a spectrum of organizations within the company, and they represent every single step along the journey that your customers will go with you, from being an original lead or prospect to ultimately not just staying with you and renewing, but actually becoming a proactive advocate on your behalf. And when you achieve that holy grail, you're now on your way to market leadership. And then everything gets easier. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to very quickly walk you through every one of these 5 components. And at the end of each one, I'm going to stop and allow some questions. I will try to address maybe 1 or 2 questions per chapter. If you've missed the boat, don't worry about it. Just write your questions down in the chat box. Okay, let's begin. Companies that are growing will be dealing with the challenge of hiring and bringing on new salespeople. Now, you may recall one of the obstacles I showed in the obstacles column was that the hiring paradigm is outdated. We no longer live in a world of individual superheroes where if you could sell a potion that grows hair on your head, that also means you can sell software. That used to be the case. Just go and get somebody who has an amazing track record, bring them in, they'll be able to sell immediately. More and more companies are finding that previous success of a sales individual doesn't guarantee success in your company, precisely because the markets have become more complicated. The technologies have become more complex. The number of people you have to work well together with in order to succeed has grown. Therefore, cultural compatibility has come in. And so what we recommend are the following 3 guidelines to be followed when evaluating people. This is not instead of a lot of things you're already doing in your hiring process. This is just to make sure these things are there. Number 1, don't limit the hiring process to the HR organization and to the hiring organization where that individual will be working. What we want to make sure is to get multiple cross-organizational perspectives, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. You want to get perspectives about your candidate's compatibility with the company from different organizations that they will need to work well with together after they get hired. Number 2, don't wait to hire the candidate before you actually initiate activities that will actually be like onboarding. So if I'm interviewing 3 or 4 or even 10 candidates, and I'm ultimately only going to hire 2, I am going to incorporate into the hiring process activities that when they get hired, retroactively will already create value towards onboarding. We'll talk about why that's important later and how the cost-benefit ratio works here, because you may be thinking, but the ones I don't hire, why would I invest in them? We'll talk about that. And finally, what we want to do is we want to test the behaviors of these candidates more than anything else. Interviews are good, but seeing people in action is one of the best ways of predicting their ability to learn, to adapt, and to be compatible with our environment. So what does that actually look like? Number 1, when we talk about getting multiple perspectives, we're talking about inviting representatives from these 5 organizations, and it's not limited to these 5. You need to think about any organization in your company based on your company's business model and design that is going to need to collaborate well with the sales organization in order to ensure a positive customer experience throughout the journey. And a lot of times we see a ton of friction between these organizations, a lot of friction, a lot of complaints. Let's make sure they learn to work well together from day 1. And the message we are sending the candidate and these organizations by making sure they meet during the hiring process is, we care about you being compatible. We want to hear your voice, different organizations. We're telling the candidate, you're going to need to work with these people. They're important. They're going to have a say in us hiring you. That is a very important anchoring statement that starts shaping their overall mindset and their approach, their DNA, so that later we don't have to deal with why they're not collaborating well with the others, and vice versa. So the first round is to get them involved in the interviews. This is actually talked about a lot in the book Work Rules by the former Laszlo, the former head of HR and people for Google, who talked about how they turned the hiring process into a science. They extended it, they had more people involved, but the level of accuracy in their prediction was very, very high. Number 2, in order to test these candidates' behaviors, which is going to be step number 3, we can't just throw them into the deep end. We need to help them succeed. We need to incorporate into the hiring process certain activities that would otherwise seem like activities that you only do during the onboarding process. So that based on these activities, we can give them challenges to perform, which will help us learn how quickly do these people learn new information? How quickly do these people learn how to integrate that information into our reality? How committed are they? How hardworking are they? How much homework do they do on their own after the sessions we gave them? So after you give them a few presentations on these are the market trends of our industry, and this is the landscape we operate in, and here's a little bit about our story as a company, and here's how to be value oriented, here's how to ask questions and interview your prospects, then you go and you give them challenges to go and conduct a consultative dialogue conversation through a simulated learning. So they can have these conversations, they can present these things, they can simulate rapport building small talk with other departments in the company as part of their learning about these departments. Or you can engage them in simulations where other people in the company role play the role of a mock client and you see how they perform. Who should be involved in these role playing? You got it right. The very same organizations that were there in the first round of interviews where we only wanted them to talk about chemistry and character compatibility. Now we're checking skill set. Now we're checking learning curve. Now, this may take more work. This may extend the window of time dedicated to the hiring process, but it is better to spend a week or two more in the hiring process than it is to lose the time that you lose later discovering you hired the wrong person. This is where planning is important, okay? This summarizes the hiring process. Before I move on to the onboarding process, are there any questions? Is there anything I said you don't agree with? Any thoughts on this? Anything you want me to elaborate on? Okay.
No, basically what you're saying, it's the famous assessment center, right? That's what we in HR call like the assessment center to understand the behaviors of the people. That's something we do here in our company, and we have great results. You can really see how people behave, and it helps to, it doesn't substitute the interview, but it does help to have a lot more information. So I totally agree, Ariel.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. We live in a world where we want to move a little bit slower. We want to get more information, and we want to test the waters before we make a commitment. It's very similar to launching a new product, right? Agile, a lot of iterative learning. Now, a question you may have that is, what happens, if I have too many cooks in the kitchen? What happens if I have dissent or disagreement between different people who interviewed the candidate? Well, this is exactly the right time to address that. Talk to them, have a conversation, let them interview the person a second time. But really, it's not necessarily about the fact that we will ultimately hire somebody that you recommended for marketing. If you were for marketing and you recommended this person, you were again, it's not about that. It's about telling you that we want to hear your voice. We don't have to reach 100% consensus, but we do want to send a message to everybody to say, we are a village. We need to make these decisions together because we're going to have to get these clients together and we're going to have to keep them happy together. And so you have a stake in the game in who we hire. And if there's a lot of disagreement, maybe we need to find more candidates that can actually generate consensus. Because how a candidate deals with multiple personas in the hiring process is parallel to how they might deal with multiple personas in the selling process. Because today's selling has become more complex, the number of executives who have to sign off on a deal has grown. It could be as high as 7 or 9 different VPs in a customer's side to approve a deal. You have to be able to appease a lot of them. You have to be able to achieve rapport with multiple personas. If you can't do it inside the company, you're going to have a problem doing it outside the company. And so I would argue that that's a good litmus test to somebody's interpersonal and strategic capabilities. Okay, let's talk about onboarding now. This is step number 2 of the 5 we're going to be talking about. Principle number 1. We all, I think, are familiar with the idea that the early years of our life have an amazing formative impact on us. A lot of our self-esteem, a lot of our philosophies about life, a lot of our traits emerge at a very early stage in our life, during what is called the formative stage of our development. Well, what we've learned over the years is that in the world of business, in the professional setting, there's also something called a formative stage that shapes our mindset and our DNA. It happens in the early stages of a company, in the early stages of an organization, and in the early stages of a relationship. And in this case, the hiring and the onboarding process are what we consider the formative stage, where we get to mold and shape the attitude, the mindset, the perspective, where the focus areas will be placed, the willingness to adapt to the company's culture. This is where we find people are most influenceable. And if they're not, this is where we want to find out so that we don't bring them on. Cultural compatibility, DNA compatibility with an organization today is, in our experience, more important than the individual performance capabilities of a certain salesperson. I don't care if they sell 2 times as much or 3 times as much. If they create a lot of friction with the organization, the math shows that they're not profitable. Number 2, during this formative stage, what we want to do is we want to anchor their focus in the following sequence. Number 1, care about your customers first. Number 2, care about the other interfaces in our company as well. And only then I want you to care about the product. A lot of times what happens is salespeople are onboarded, and the first thing they go through is, let's teach you all of our solutions. Let's walk you through all of our portfolio. If you only have 1 or 2 products, it's not a great thing to do, but it's not too damaging. But if you are a company that has 300 products, and we've worked with companies who have 1,000 products, right? Multinational corporations. Are you really going to sit this salesperson down and spend 3 to 4 months just getting them to learn about all these products? That's not going to work. By the time they're done, they will have missed the market. We want to get to a point where our salespeople are outside talking to customers as quickly as possible. And we want to make sure that we are teaching them about our products and our solutions in sequence with what the market is telling them is most necessary. Okay? And that is what we call just-in-time solutions. Now, you may notice that there's a phrase here called operational empathy. That's where I talk about the relationship of these salespeople with their interfaces inside the company, all the other organizations that are outside of the sales organization, but that are inside the journey of the customer. And we'll talk about operational empathy later when we talk about how important it is to make sure that they care about the other organizations. Now, what does this look like in practice? Your onboarding program, based on our experience at least, is the following. Number 1, make sure that your candidates know, and this is a direct continuation to the hiring process, make sure the first thing they know how to do is ask the right questions. Before they learn about your products, before they learn how to provide the right answers, teach them to listen. Teach them to be curious. Teach them the concept of reverse engineering, from need to solution, not from solution to a need. The world used to operate based on a paradigm called a solution looking for a problem. I'm a hammer and I'm looking for nails. Today, the world is much more about a problem looking for a solution. Tell me what you need and I will put something together for you. Because products are so complex and adjustable, because a lot of times, even after the deal gets closed, there's a delivery team that does the implementation. Even when you take on Salesforce, after you pay, you still have to customize how your CRM will work. And so there's a lot of flexibility here. What you want to make sure you do first is learn the needs of the customer. So we're going to teach them this concept of value discovery through consultative dialogue. There are many ways of doing this. We have one, but as long as you approach this idea of, I'm going to teach them how to interview, it really doesn't matter who you use, as long as the method works. Number 2, once you've taught this to them, we're going to do the same cycle we did during the hiring process. We're going to do role playing. Role playing is fundamentally important. I'm going to talk about that later. There's only so much you can learn in a classroom just by listening. There's only so much you're going to be able to learn from me today just by listening to this webinar. At the end of the day, we have to practice. Now, what we do here is we say, let's role play customers. We're not going to put you in front of real customers. You're not ready. What we're going to do is we're going to have different people in the company, predominantly other very successful veteran salespeople, or other people in the company who have a very good perspective of the customer. And we're going to go do a mock interview with them, do a value discovery process with them. And they will share with you information based on kits that were made in advance to represent certain customers. After the role play is complete and they've done multiple role plays, ask the salesperson to come back to you and share with you what they've learned, and ask them which of the needs that came up in these interviews do they find most interesting, or which of the needs do they think are most urgent to the customer. And the minute they tell you this is the need, you, the person running the sales enablement program, will say, excellent. We have 2 products that actually answer that need. Now let's learn about those products. So basically what we're doing is we are determining which products and solutions in our portfolio to teach our new salespeople first, based on actual needs that they're going out and discovering. Why is that so important? Number 1, the anchoring effect. We are using this formative stage to anchor in their mind this idea that they are here to sell value. They are not here to sell products. That we want their relationship with their customers to first and foremost begin with listening, with consultative dialogue. We are committed to creating value for our customers. We don't want to just peddle our products. Because even if we do peddle our products and we successfully close a deal, if these products don't generate sustainable, lasting value for the customer, they won't renew next year. And without a 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year of renewal, we will not be profitable with these accounts. And our company valuation will go down, because renewal rates determine company valuations, especially for early stage hypergrowth companies. And so this is all very, very important. The second reason we want to use this model is because learning is internalized the best when there is a short window between acquiring knowledge and implementing knowledge. So basically, we are teaching them about the product after they've already begun the value discovery. And then they're going to do a second simulation where they go back to that person who role played the customer and say, I have a product for you, let me pitch it. So they're applying in real practice the knowledge they just learned about a product in context of a real need that's been simulated. That's how you make sure that when you teach people something, they actually remember it and they know how to use it. There's a very big problem we've come across a lot of companies where there's a very impressive sales book. There are dozens, if not hundreds of pages from marketing and from sales enablement about the products, but the salespeople don't read them. Or if they read them, they don't remember them. This is a very good way of making sure whatever we teach them, they retain. Ultimately, impact will look like this. We have a longer recruiting and onboarding process, but because the onboarding process was part of the onboarding, we can have a shorter net onboarding time after we hired them. And overall, this will lead to them being able to close a deal on their own faster. And ultimately, we should be seeing a double-digit reduction in the overall amount of time from hire to full quota carrying capacity, which was one of the 9 points I shared with you in the original dashboard today, which all companies care about. The longer it takes you to take a salesperson to full quota carrying capacity, the longer it's going to take you to return the investment on hiring them. Because during the time they're learning to mature, you are probably subsidizing their bonus structure. Because traditionally, salespeople will get 50% of their annual earning as a base salary and 50% in bonuses. Traditionally, it's not always the case. But they will tell you during the interview, I expect to be subsidized during the first, second, maybe even third quarter, depending on how complex your industry is. And usually they're right, precisely because of what I said before about the hiring paradigm. They know they can't just switch companies and sell within 1 month full quota. They know things have changed, and they expect you to allow them to succeed. So we want to reduce that time because we want to reach profitability faster, or because if they haven't reached full quota carrying capacity within 6 months, we want to know if we hired the wrong person and quickly switch to somebody else. So this summarizes the onboarding process. Before I move to the third chapter, I want to ask you if you have any questions about this, anything that you don't agree with, anything that you think may have been missed. Thoughts, comments? Okay, so I'm going to move on to the upskilling. I know I'm moving very fast. I'm reminding you the goal of this webinar is to run you as quickly as possible across all 5 areas, because we know that not all 5 are relevant to all of you, but all 5 are critically important to create the holistic approach. And because it's so complicated, it's the holistic approaches that are going to create game-changing moves, not just individual efforts in siloed departments. So let's talk a little bit about the upskilling. Here we want to move ultimately from the transactional to the consultative approach. Upskilling is what we define as the ongoing maintenance of our salespeople's capabilities, making sure they are always relevant to the market, that they are always relevant to our company's stage of development. Again, we have guiding principles here that we want to follow. Number 1, and I'm going to go back to this. I know I mentioned it before, but I want to elaborate here. For many years, what we would do as a company, we started back in 2003, was we would come in, we would give a talk, and at best, we would summarize it and give people a summary. And even though we were good and we got good feedback, it was easy to see how behaviors, it wasn't sufficient to affect real sustainable behavioral change. And so we sat down and we started asking, what's the missing element? What do we need to put more of? And it became very, very clear that we have to reduce the amount of content we give and create more opportunity for simulation. Because simulation is where the theory meets the individual. And that's where we can actually move from generic teaching to customized learning. So what are the 3 things you want to make sure you have? You want to make sure you have experts who can bring you the knowledge and who can teach your people. You want to make sure these experts aren't just flying off the seat of their pants, aren't just teaching intuitively, but are always supported with clearly documented methodologies. And that's very, very important, because those methodologies are going to be the capabilities they leave behind. Our entire philosophy at Vayomar is we're teachers. We want to make ourselves redundant as quickly as possible. We want to transfer our knowledge to you as quickly as possible. But how do we make money? Well, we acquire new knowledge, and then we give that to you as well. So you want experts and you want methodologies, but still these two things together are going to be responsible for, at best, 50% of the impact. The other 50%, simulations. Very, very important. There's an entire approach and there are entire methodologies for how to build simulations. If this is something you're interested in, let me know and we will make sure to share knowledge with you on that as well. Number 2, leverage your top talent. This is very, very important. A lot of companies have a situation where they have a small minority of salespeople who dramatically outperform the rest. It's the classic bell curve. These people can sometimes be responsible. 10% of your sales organization can reach a point where it's responsible for over 50% of your sales. And a lot of times companies they hesitate to interrupt the workflow of these individuals. That's a mistake. What you want to do is you want to take approximately 10 to 20% of your top performers' capabilities, and you want to repurpose that from adding force to force multiplication. You want to turn your best talent into peer-to-peer teachers. And I want to give you an example just to illustrate to you how powerful this can be and how urgency is never an excuse. In World War II, shortly after the Americans entered the war and joined the Allied forces, there was a huge issue with the airfare warfare that the Germans had brought in as a new method of fighting. And basically, shortly after the war began and the Americans entered the war, a very, very controversial decision was made by the Air Force Academy. They issued an order to bring back the top ace pilots from Europe back to the Air Force Academy and turn them into teachers and instructors. And people were like, you're crazy, we need them in the air. And the thinking behind this, which proved correct, was as follows. We can't have our entire business rely on our top talent. The Germans didn't feel the same, kept their aces in the air, and within a matter of months, their top pilots died. Because if you're fighting in World War II in the air, every mission you go on, you're statistically more likely to die. And so within a certain amount of time, the Germans lost all of their top pilots and were left with mediocre aviators. The Americans kept pumping out more and more top aces and ultimately gained advantage. You want to do the same thing with your organization. And again, they talk about this in Google, how they did it, and in other companies. Use your people to teach, because no matter how good the experts I just spoke about are, we've done 18 years of work, hundreds of companies, you name it, so what? We will never be able to compete with the total sum of intuitive knowledge dormant in your company. And your ability to take that dormant intuitive knowledge and from intuition to methodology, extract it from your top performers and turn it into a methodology everybody can use. Now, what would you prefer? That your top performers sell 20% more, or that your 70% performers all sell 10% more? Do the math and you will find that by uplifting your 70%, you are going to make more money within the same overhead. Next, make sure your simulation-based learning is data-driven. Make sure your simulations and the role plays include feedback and scorecards and evaluations from multiple perspectives over time. Because what that data will do for you is it will allow you to conduct a second round of simulation-based learning that is customized specifically to the needs of every single individual in your sales team. I can't tell you how many times we've participated in, helped design, facilitated sales kickoff events for companies all around the world. And inevitably, and we recommend this, there is not just general assembly sessions, there's breakout sessions. And the most common breakout sessions we see are either product-related breakout sessions, where you have different representatives from the products in different rooms talking about the product, generically to everybody, with different regions rotating from room to room, or you have regional breakout sessions, because everybody wants to talk about their region. Now, I'm not entirely against regional breakouts. I think they're important. I think every region has its own unique distinctions. But at the end of the day, when you do regional or product-based learning, you are not acknowledging the deviations in knowledge and skill and capabilities of the individuals who make up your workforce. If we have 80 people go through the same simulation all over the world, and we find that 3 people from the Asia Pacific region, 7 people from EMEA, 2 people from North America, 2 people from Latin America, all got a low score on the same parameter. Doesn't it make more sense to pool them into one group and then teach that group exactly what it needs? The more personalized learning will be, thanks to you being data-driven, the more relevant the learning will be for the individuals and the greater their commitment. Not to mention, you will now be using a scalpel, right? Not a blunt object, to elevate the overall skills of your individuals. Okay? So I see that some people are writing me questions in private. I'm not sure if it's because you don't want to bother everybody or if it's a private question. The questions that are long, I'm going to wait to read at the end of the segment. Okay, so simulate, leverage top talent, be data-driven, and customize the follow-up learning. The more customized, the better. And in today's world, where you can do remote learning and one-on-one peer-to-peer in any way nobody's flying, this can be a very good solution for you. So, based on all of this, what are some of the key focus areas that we have found that are critically important, that are must-have foundational capabilities for any organization? And I want to emphasize again, I am only focusing this webinar on things that I find have universal appeal. There are obviously additional layers that need to be considered that you are probably already considering, that are being derived from your unique circumstance, whether it's the industry or the product or the geography that you're in, or the organizational structure you have, or the maturity level that you're at. So I want to be very clear. This doesn't encompass everything you have to do. This just represents 5 key focus areas that you want to make sure your salespeople can excel at. Number one, the field of behavioral economics. This is a relatively new field. It was awarded less than 20 years ago. It was awarded a Nobel Prize to an Israeli psychologist, Daniel Kahneman, for his joint work with Amos Tversky, who sadly died before he could also be awarded the prize. And what they found was the code based on which the human operating system responds to its environment. They basically came up and said, we have two systems that help us make decisions every day, every moment. System one and system two. One is rational, one is non-rational. And they mapped it out and they found a list of rules of thumb by which our brains respond. And it's universal. Not knowing this is like trying to operate a new computer without reading the manual. Consultative selling, I don't think I need to expand on that too much. Rapport building. This is very, very important. One of the key factors or challenges we are dealing with in the age of the digital revolution, even before COVID-19, was the fact that the world got smaller. Companies got bigger. Now you have virtual teams across multiple time zones, which means you also have multiple cultures represented in the team. You also have multi-generational dimensions in your company. And the fact that we are working remotely and the fact that we didn't grow up together in the same village is having an amazing impact on the ability to feel trust towards another person. And so we need salespeople who are very capable in creating a sense of trust, in creating rapport, in demonstrating authenticity, vulnerability, transparency, in communicating to the other person this idea of, look, you and I both know that even if we close a deal together, it will never unpack itself the way we originally thought. We know that. This is a 2-year project, a 5-year project. It could be a $30,000 annual license. It could be a $500 million managed services deal. One way or another, everybody around the table can pretty much be sure that there are going to be unexpected problems, that we're never going to have all the features we thought we had, that there are going to be tickets that we didn't anticipate. And what customers want to know is not only can they trust you in putting their money in your hands, but in a way they're putting their career in your hands. And they want to know that they can trust you. And the ability to demonstrate that and do it authentically is very, very important. Strategic thinking, number 4. If you manage a pipeline of opportunities, the minute you have more than 3, 4, 5 opportunities in your pipeline, and we want to hope that you always have dozens, if not more, you now are faced with the challenge of, how do I allocate my time, my energy, my effort, my resources? How do I decide which deal to pursue first? And a lot of times, this is a reactive dynamic where we respond to the customers that respond to us because we want to meet quarterly targets. I'm not saying that's entirely wrong, but I'm saying it's certainly not a strategic approach to managing your pipeline. And what you want to make sure is that your salespeople know how to look at a pipeline the way investors look at a portfolio, how to map the opportunities based on which of these customers, based on the value discovery process we conducted with them, do we have the most value to offer? Which of these customers are we most likely to be able to deliver on if they close with us? Which of this customer is bleeding the most right now? And which of these customers, if I close a deal with, will actually elevate the entire company's reputation in the market? These are all strategic considerations that I think, and at Vayomar team, we believe you should encourage your salespeople to adopt beyond just the idea of, how do I close the next deal? How do I answer the first email in my inbox? How do I make sure I meet my monthly quarterly? It's very, very important, the monthly quarterly, but not if it comes at the expense of a broader strategic approach. Okay, finally, executive presence. I cannot tell you how many times we've met companies that have gone through a phase where if until now they were selling a product or a service that was $100,000, $200,000, now they want to elevate and sell a $2 million deal. But what they have is a sales force made up of individuals who have become accustomed to and who have elevated only to the level necessary to sell to the mid-level management of their customer. And they come to us and they say, we need to get our salespeople to be able to hold their own with CEOs, with C-levels. We need to be able to get them to talk the language of management and to show the strategic impact our offering has on their company. And they're right to ask for that. It's very, very important that your salespeople are able to think like a CEO, to think like an executive leadership team, and to communicate like one, even if they're not going to meet them directly. Because a lot of times, the job of a good salesperson is to make it possible for their counterpart to do this with the senior executives who they have to bring the opportunity to. So we have to not just sell to somebody, we have to help that person further promote the sale upwards in the customer, in the target customer. And executive presence is a critical thing for that. There are many ways of doing this. The world is rich with methodologies. I share with you these 5 methodologies that I'm not going to go through now, just so that if you're interested at all in learning more about how this can be done through our approach, we will be happy to share that information with you. But in a nutshell, these 5 titles that I'm sharing with you in the Vayomar methodologies are the core of how we help address these 5 core focus areas. Okay, take a quick time out. I want to look at some of the questions that I've gotten. In the meantime, you're welcome to think of some of your own. Let me see. We have a question here about the onboarding process, right? Dealing with, let me see. Since it seems that this process happens before the person is actually hired, right? You referred to them as candidates. Then it sounds like this process is very efficient for the companies, though going to take lots of time from the candidates. Interesting. Which is not necessarily considered positive from the candidate's angle. Okay. One of the things that we are seeing, and again, this came up in the example I brought from Google, and we've seen it in other companies, is that serious candidates respect companies who take the hiring process seriously. And sophisticated candidates understand that it is in their best interests not to get hired if they are not truly compatible with that company. It is a counterintuitive, but absolutely accurate sentiment. Think about it. Do you really want to leave a position where you may be doing well in order to go into a new company where you're going to spend a year onboarding and learning and maturing, and where your bonus will be at risk, and that if you fail, you will have to start the whole process over again? Do you want that? You don't. And so I think what I would say to this question is, it is very, very important to communicate the rationale of the hiring process to the candidates right from the get-go. So when you have a meeting with a candidate, one of the first things you want to do on your first date is say, let us walk you through a little bit about of how our hiring process happens. Here's what you can expect to happen over the next few weeks, or over the next month. And sometimes it can take 3 months. Walk them through it. Get their feedback. They may say to you, sorry, that's too much for me, and leave. Good. You don't want these candidates, because if they're not willing to put in the time and effort during the hiring process, how much time and effort above and beyond are they going to do after the hiring process? When you fight with them over and over again, why it's important for them to attend webinars and sales trainings and participate with and learn about the other departments in the company. We want people who understand that it takes time to learn, that it's worth investing in getting it right the first time. So that's my answer to that question. Number 2. There we go. Oh, okay, I have a correction here about who received the Nobel Prize, that it was possibly both of them who received it. I'm almost sure that only Kahneman received it, but I promise to check that and get back to you. Okay, we've covered 3 out of the 5 focus areas. And I want to give you an opportunity, again, if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, to allow me also to slow down for the processing. Or if not, I will gladly move on to the 4th category.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Gabriel.
I would like to ask you if you could expand a little bit on the distinction on how you would go about the simulation versus methodology. I find it very interesting, and I may not actually be up to speed with that.
So wait, let me just see that I understood what you're asking. You're talking about how do I merge the methodology with the simulation?
Right, and I don't want to abuse, but like, what would be the proportions of each? Like, I may be a little bit old school here, but I believe very much in methodology, and I don't do a lot of simulation. So I'm really curious about it.
Okay. So I don't have a set equation for you. I don't have an algorithm that says for every hour of learning, do an hour of simulating and so on and so forth. I will tell you at least how we approach this.
Yeah.
What we do is we make sure that every single methodology has multiple case studies or simulation scenarios that make it possible to actually practice using the methodology. And what we want to make sure is that these different scenarios cover a wide enough breadth of different situations that the salesperson will need to deal with. Now, the scenarios will never cover all the situations. One of the things we write in the early pages of our simulation program in the setting of expectations is we say the purpose of this program is to help your people simulate enough uncomfortable situations that they will develop an intuitive read of a situation so that they can use that intuition to deal with other scenarios that we did not cover. Now, how many times a person needs to simulate will ultimately be a function of how many times, the score they get. If we see that certain people are finding it very, very difficult to adopt a certain methodology, we will need to invest more time in them unless we decide that they're not relevant for this position anymore or that somebody else on their team can do it, right? But the number of simulations, generally speaking, rule of thumb, this is not, I don't have data to support this. I'm answering you purely on an intuitive level.
Sure.
I would say that every month a salesperson should participate in at least one simulation.
Okay, great. Thanks, man.
Simulation-based learning is fundamentally important. And I think learning through simulations is a great opportunity to incorporate new challenges that naturally evolve in an ever-changing marketplace, especially in a company that grows. And I will actually give you very detailed examples of 2 types of workshops and simulations that you can have people go through in the next chapter. But generally speaking, what do we want to make sure a simulation kit has, right? Number 1, a relevant scenario. Number 2, you want to make sure that scenario is linked to aspects that have to do with the company's sales cycle. You want to make sure that it's linked to the different types of companies it meets, to the different type of industries that it engages with, and to the different types of buying personas that it will be facing. Number 2, every scenario, every simulation is a story. So every story has a once upon a time. It should always have a background component that says, I'm walking you into this scenario. And the underlying message is, this is the kind of information you should always have available when you meet a customer. It should always have a clear target of what will be considered success from this simulation. And it should always have some related methodologies for them to learn on their own. During the upskilling phase, the ultimate success you can achieve is in teaching your salespeople to become self-driven lifelong learners. You want to create a sales force that is made up of people that are so darn curious, that are so hungry to learn, that have the best combination between confidence and a very strong self-esteem so that they can face some of the greatest people in the market, but still have sufficient modesty and curiosity and intellectual rigor to say, I know the market changes, I know my competitors are evolving, I know that we are evolving, I want to learn and simulate as much as I can. Finally, why should the good ones simulate? They don't need it, but it's not just about them, is it? If we can use the top performers as a role model for the others to learn how the right way to do things are, that's how we elevate the 70%. These are all methods that can dramatically increase your overall quota carrying capacity in the company without having to increase overhead. And that is very, very meaningful for the company's bottom line. Did I answer the question?
Thank you, Ariel. Yes, it was interesting. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. What is the final thing to think about when we talk about the overall skills of our people? A lot of times, customers have come to us and said, look, our salespeople, they get lost in the weeds. All they want to do is talk about the product. All they want to do is talk about the features. They get up, they show this phone, and they say, look at this phone. Look at how large the screen is. And look at how light it is. And look at how much internal memory it has. And look how durable it is. I can drop it and it won't break. And look at how much internal storage it has. And look at the warranty we're offering. That's what we call feature selling. Feature selling is the sure way not to close a deal. Feature selling is important, but at the right timing. Believe it or not, features are the last thing your salespeople should talk about when closing a deal with the customer. Ultimately, what we see is companies come to us and say, can you teach our people how to shift from selling a product to selling value, from selling technology to selling impact? We want our salespeople to learn how to talk about everything that we offer through the perspective of the customer, okay? Not through the perspective of the technology. They need to understand the technology so they can talk about it later in showing how the technology will accomplish the impact. But it's always impact first. And for that, there are all kinds of methodologies. For Vayomar, we teach value orientation, and it talks about exactly how to do that and build a value dashboard like the one I showed you at the beginning, and I will show you at the end. What less companies come to us with, and this is what we consider to be a blind spot in the industry in many cases, is the next step of elevation, from impact selling to identity selling. Remember, we are here to make sure that we are building a lasting relationship with our customers. We are here to make sure that our customers stay with us for years. And one of the things that will drive that, other than keeping the promises we made, is this idea of being able to sit in front of a customer and say, I want to tell you why you should work with us simply because of who we are. Let's talk about our philosophy. Let's talk about the greater purpose that drives our company. Let's talk about the core values that we adhere to. Let's talk about the type of people we hire. Let's talk about how we see the relationship with our customers. Because we want you to know that we think we are going to be good partners for you even 7 years from today. I don't even know what I'm going to have to offer in 7 years from a product perspective, and you don't know what you're going to need, but you're still going to want to partner with somebody like me. Being able to build a narrative about the identity of the company as the key gateway at the beginning of any presentation to a customer. The presentation would start with, let me tell you a little bit about what we stand for. Very short. And based on that, we are able to develop this impact for you using our portfolio of products. Which one would you like to hear about first? I'm not rushing through the gates peddling my software. I want to talk about identity and impact. And that is the approach we follow and recommend in how to build an upskilling program on a regular basis. Okay. Next, collaboration and alignment. Can anybody guess why we use the passing the baton metaphor? There's a really interesting TED Talk about this. Okay. There is an amazing TED Talk by a very senior executive in BCG who gives a case study of how the French relay race team was able to beat the American relay race team in the Olympics in spite of the following fact. A relay team has 4 runners. Not only were 3 out of the 4 women in the American relay team 1-to-1 faster than their parallel French runners, 2 out of the 4 women in the American team were the fastest in the world. And the French coach was trying to think about what would be the strategy. How can we beat this team? 3 out of their 4 runners are just 1-to-1 faster than ours. And then he realized that it's not going to be about getting his runners to run individually faster. He calculated and found that the opportunity to gain valuable time was in the handoff of the baton. And while the original training regiment was all about how to get blood to flow to the legs so that they could run faster, he started focusing on exercises that would rush blood to the chest, to the throat. Why? Because when runners pass the baton in a relay to one another, there are various techniques in how they do it that include, and this is one of the things he did, yelling, right? So if Eric and I are on the same team, I'm running, and at some point we've developed a unique yelling mechanism where Eric, right, and I shout a mantra of some sort, and I run with Eric, and there's a point we both hold the baton, I let go, he keeps running. In the transitions from first to second, second to third, and third to fourth, the French team gained the necessary time advantage in a way where they ultimately won. So there were 3 individual faster runners, but there was one faster team. And this goes back to the paradigm shift I talked about earlier with regards to the idea of it takes a village. It's not going to be the individual hero. And I want to tell you something. I have seen too many cases of individual salespeople who are incredibly talented at what they do, who close remarkably high ratio deals, who cannot be standed by the other people. And ultimately, my recommendation will be teach them to get along or say goodbye to them. Compatibility with the team is worth more than the individual runner. And anybody wants to see the math behind that later, I will be happy to share some examples after the webinar. So we are now in chapter number 4 talking about the guiding principles of collaboration and alignment. Number 1, we're back to the term operational empathy. We want to make sure that there is operational empathy between the different individuals representing critical interfaces in the company. We want to make sure that we are investing in alignment exercises that cultivate operational empathy, but also surface logistical and operational misunderstandings that are the cracks within which deals fall. And we want to make sure that we cultivate a culture that is rich with non-functional interactions. Let's take a deeper look at this terminology. This is Vayomar terminology, and I want to clarify what it is. So I think we all understand that empathy, I doubt I need to convince anybody that empathy is a crucial building block to interpersonal dynamics between people in our private life. We tend to feel empathy to people we love. We tend to love people we feel empathy towards. The modern organization has developed away from empathy for a list of reasons I won't go into here. But operational empathy is the ability to understand and relate to the challenges faced by the critical interfaces I depend on. And once I achieve this understanding, I want to also be able to alter my behavior. I want to shift my response. Instead of being so pissed off at marketing for not generating good leads, instead of constantly complaining about legal making the contracts impossible to sign, instead of complaining why finance department won't let me give a discount, I'm going to change my perspective and try to understand where they're coming from. This is critically important. Number 2, non-functional interactions. Non-functional interactions are any interaction that is not driven by something that I want to get from you right now. Think about it. The relationships you have outside of work, would you feel comfortable only engaging with family and friends when you need something from them or when they need something from you? Would you write a text message to a long lost friend from 4 years ago, an acquaintance, saying, "Hey Jennifer, wow, it's been 4 years. I can't believe we haven't spoken so long. I hope you're great. Listen, can I borrow your car this weekend?" You probably wouldn't do that because it's clear to you. You don't build meaningful relationships on "I'll call you when I need you" dynamic. But think about the organization. Think about what happens in companies around the world. What percentage of the interactions are in fact non-functional? I'll answer an email when I get it. I'll send one when I need something. We'll meet at a meeting that has a purpose. We want to make sure that we create opportunities for people to engage with each other just for the sake of the human connection. And this is why offsites are so important, but we don't have to only invest in offsites. We can create workshops that create these opportunities and role-playing games that create these opportunities where we mix non-functional with functional. So let me give you an example of 2 types of workshops that we at Vayomar offer, but I'm giving this to you mainly to give you a sense of what the workshops we think you should be looking for should have, which means this is about you understanding the fundamentals so that you can go out there and find the workshops that work best for you. The first workshop is actually called Passing the Baton, in the spirit of what we're talking about. And what we do in this workshop is before the workshop begins, we map out a list of scenarios, of situations where we see friction, where we see operational blind spots, where we see logistically the ball being dropped. And it usually happens in the handover. And every time a ball like this drops, at best, our customer is going to have a difficult experience. At worst, it's going to drive them away. So we sit and we map who are the different roles that need to hand off to each other. You see that in the roles column. We sit with you in advance and we build different scenarios where we want to see, do people know what's expected of them per scenario? A lot of people may have a role description, but they don't have a role description that's linked to a scenario. So we come up with these different scenarios. We identify who are the functions, who are the roles relevant to this scenario. We sit them down at a table or at a bar stool with batons on the desk or on the floor, and we say, we're going to read out the scenario. If you think there's something you need to do right now, reach out and pick up a baton. And a lot of interesting things happen. Sometimes nobody picks up the baton and people look at each other like, not my job. Great, let's talk about that. Sometimes 3 different people reach for the same baton. Wait a minute, I thought I was supposed to do something here. Let's talk about that. You finish describing what you would do with the baton, you have to hand it over to somebody. And some people are like, why are you handing it over to me? I thought you were responsible for this. This is a great way of doing quality assurance on supply chain and handoffs. And it will surface a lot of misunderstandings. And by the way, it will surface a lot of insights for how we might change the process across these organizations. In doing so, it's creating an opportunity for these people to meet and talk and share frustrations and feel like they're a team. So that's the passing the baton workshop. The principles here are getting people together and getting them to actually talk about the process. You can do it with us through this or with anybody else, or you can do it on your own. Next, the collaboration marketplace. The collaboration marketplace is actually a game, and it can run anywhere between 3 hours to a day. In this game, we actually get different departments to sit siloed at their desk. So customer support sits at one desk, and customer success sits at another desk, and the delivery at a third desk, and finance and legal at another desk, and so on and so forth. And we basically get them to play a game that's like a commercial exchange. That's why we called it a marketplace. What we ask them to do is we say, listen, who are the departments in the organization that you feel you have the greatest dependency on? And can you please describe to us what is the nature of that dependency? So the salespeople might say, I depend on legal to approve the contract. And delivery says, I depend on sales not to promise things we can't deliver. And so on and so forth. And then we say to them, great, write it all down. Everything you want, write it down. Anybody you want to ask something of, write it down. 1 ask per ticket. Mark down the department this ticket is going to be sent to, write down where it came from, write down your request. Send it over. They will either deny your request, in which case you're going to get your ticket back with an explanation, or they will approve it. Oh, and we forgot one thing. You have to have $1 that we produced in order to issue a request. You just came up with 20 different requests. You each get $3, 1 per request. Now they're learning empathy. Now they're understanding that they can't just bombard other departments with endless requests. They have to prioritize. They have to think about it. The team who got the ticket has to decide if they're accepting it or not. If they accept it, they keep the $1, and now they're $1 richer. They can make another request. Now, to keep this real, the idea is that all ticket approvals get saved, publicly announced. All the ones who got rejected get discussed. And this is another opportunity to create fun and gamification with real discussions of what's working and what's not working. So this is just 2 examples of a list of countless workshops that exist out there in the world that we recommend that you invest in. And if you're thinking, oh God, I don't have time for this. People are not going to show up. People are busy. They have to meet their deadlines. These workshops will pay for themselves in the amount of time saved around tickets that have to go 3, 4, 5 cycles. They will pay for themselves in the number of escalations that get reduced. they will pay for themselves in the increase in positive customer experience. This is worth fighting for. How frequently should you do them? Here, just like I told you, Gabriel, before with the simulations, if things are business as usual, if the company's going pretty well, do this on a quarterly basis. And by the way, make sure all workshops you do are compatible with virtual delivery, especially in the day and age that we work with today. But if your company is in crisis because you've seen a spike in problems, or if you've just launched a new organizational structure, or you've just announced a new process in the company, well, you should do this on a month-by-month basis until you see meaningful improvement in the operational KPIs. Okay, any questions before I go into our last chapter? I hope your head's not exploding. We got one more. Okay, let's talk about everybody sells value. There's a wonderful myth, I think it's a myth, about a senior executive at a worldwide hotel chain that prides itself on all of its personalization features and their technologies and so on and so forth, who goes on a vacation and walks into a hotel on his own, and this is a boutique third world hotel, no technologies, no cameras, nothing, really kind of boutique old school. But the minute he walks in, the concierge turns to him and says, "Welcome, sir. We're so happy to see you here for the first time. You're going to have an amazing experience." So like, how do they know it's my first time here? I don't remember registering with a CRM system or anything. Never mind. Comes back after a few months, this time with his family. Walks in. One of the bellboys says to him, "Welcome back, sir. We're so pleased to see you here. And to your wife and kids, welcome to your first visit at the hotel." He can't believe this. He's looking for hidden cameras. He can't find it. He goes to the manager and he says, "You've got to tell me how you do this. This level of personalization without any technology, it's amazing." The guy says, "It's very, very simple. We pay the taxi drivers to talk you up on your ride to the hotel. And one of the questions they're asked to ask you is it your first time in the hotel? When they put your suitcases down, if it's your first time in the hotel, they put it to your left. And if it's your repeat visit, we put it to your right. And that's how we know." Very simple. Who thought taxi drivers could help in customer service? All their job is to get you from one location to the hotel. Everybody Sells Value is about a very, very important concept, which basically says that your company has something called a sales surface area. Your sales surface area is made up of all the people who can have a meaningful impact on your customer's overall journey with you. So of course, your sales surface area includes your sales departments, your marketing people, some resellers, channel partners, of course. But guess what? They also include all of your non-sales, non-marketing, customer-facing people. If you are a large company providing services, sometimes you will even have people on your staff, on your team, who sit at the office on-prem, on location with your customers. Or sometimes they will fly there for a few weeks to do a delivery and implementation process. Or you have the people who answer ticket requests. These people, they are absolutely crucial for your success. And if you use them well, you will be able to grow your overall sales quota carrying capacity of your company without hiring one extra salesperson. Your ability to grow your sales and your ability to secure retention rates is not simply a function of how many heads you have in the sales organization. Your non-sales people are the ones who have the greatest amount of influence on multiple points, such as, is the customer getting good service? Do they feel listened to? They are the ones who can actually make sure that your customer is using the products. You know how many times companies end up selling a service that doesn't get used by the customer? And then when it's time to renew, the customer's like, yeah, but I wasn't using it. Who do you think is going to be there to drive that? It's not just going to be the customer success people. It's all the people who interact with the customer and who find out that they're only using it for this, they're not using it for this. And I found out because when the ticket request was opened, I contacted the customer and I asked them questions. And I discovered why the ticket was open and that they weren't actually using other features and so on and so forth. So let's take a look at this from a bird's eye view. These 4 quadrants represent your entire workforce. And obviously, this is more relevant for larger corporations. But you have the right part, which are all the people who sell a promise. And you have the left part, which are all the people who are responsible for keeping the process. You have the bottom part, which are all the people who interact with the customer remotely. And you have the top part, where all the people who actually engage in high-touch, in-person interactions. Obviously, this is on the decline since COVID-19, but it will come back, I have no doubt about it. But even if you're on the left and on the bottom, you are responsible for these 4 things. You are responsible for having a conversation with the customer that makes sure they understand that they just got value. A product that works well sometimes isn't noticed because it works well. A lot of products that are responsible for automation or automated problem solving or quality assurance to avoid bugs in the code, when they work well, nothing happens. When do we know that our eyes work, that we have eyes? When they hurt. You really feel your eyes when you see? When we have systems that work, sometimes the value realization is lost. Especially the value, I'm sorry, I got confused. The value recognition is lost. Apologize for that. The value realization is about engaging with the customer and making sure they actually use the product to the full extent of the value it has to offer. The customer experience is about making sure the customer feels they are being taken care of. And a lot of times, the people who are responsible for keeping the promise were not evaluated or hired based on their interpersonal skills. They were not hired based on their sales skills. They were not hired based on them being proactive, outgoing extroverts. They were hired because they have exceptional technological proficiency and capabilities. They know the product. They know how to solve problems. But by nature, they are reactive. If we can teach them, and we've done this with multiple organizations, and we've seen many millions of dollars of extra revenue generated by working with these people and showing them just how important they are. And a lot of times, it's not that they're passive because they don't care, or that they don't take seriously the importance of selling. A lot of times, they're not the ones who are taken seriously. They're simply overlooked by the organization. And when you sit down with these people and you show them just how crucial they are, their sense of pride, their sense of ownership, erupts. People want to be meaningful. People would love to contribute. They may not see themselves as salespeople, nor should they. It's not their job to close the deal. But it is their job to identify opportunities for generating more value for the customer, either through value realization of what was already sold, or through opportunities to upsell, to cross-sell. They are the ones with the finger to the pulse of the client, especially if they're situated on premises with the client. They are the ones who have the highest number of interactions with the client. By the way, when things go bad and there's a rise and increase in tickets, every one of those tickets is an amazing opportunity to create a positive experience. And that experience is what the customer is left with psychologically. Not the original problem, but actually how I felt about how the problem was dealt with. And so everybody sells value, probably one of the most overlooked blind spots and one of the most strategic things you can do to help your company improve margins and revenue. And when I say margins, I mean when these people work well, the time to solution is shorter. The number of cycles in solving a problem, shorter. The response time, faster. So the overall efficiency is improved, and efficiency in delivering a service to a customer is a key factor in the overall P&L of the company. So let's sum up. This is the Sales Enablement Value Dashboard. This is your single slide strategic overview of everything that I just said, and every strategy can have a single slide overview. Here are the 9 things we want to achieve. Here are the 6 obstacles, in the very least, that stand in our way. And here are 5 key focus areas that we can look at. And my call to action for you, walking away from this webinar, is to take a close look at this dashboard, which we will make available to you, and to ask yourself, where do I stand on every one of these? Which one of these is most relevant for me? Are we hiring? No? Okay, put it aside. Do we need major changes in our upskilling based on what we saw here? No, but we are seeing other problems maybe we need to focus on. Do we have the right people for the overall sales surface area? The very, very first thing I'm going to recommend for you is to kind of diagnose yourself, even if it's not purely data-driven, even if it's simply a factor of your intuitive sense or conversations you have with your colleagues over a cup of coffee or at the end of a Zoom call. Hey, what do you think about our alignment? Do you think we're aligned well? I can tell you that most companies are not, and not because people aren't trying or don't care. It's simply a matter of we live in an unprecedented state of complexity. And we live in a time where the reality we have learned to grow accustomed to, its shelf life, is decreased dramatically. And so we constantly have to learn about new things. So if we have to learn about new things, it means we also have to adapt. Adapting is difficult when you have to get a lot of people aligned. So usually we find that most companies can stand to improve alignment. Most companies can stand to improve the everybody sells. But that doesn't mean that's the truth for you. So the call to action for you is go and look at these 5 core areas. Ask yourself what you're doing right, what you might be able to change based on this, and only then start thinking about what next steps you might take. And for those of you who are going to need a reminder, like I said, this webinar will be made available to you in recording, and you'll get the deck, of course, that I shared with you. So with 7 minutes to spare, I'm happy to open it up to any questions you might have. And if not, give you these now 6 minutes, probably for a break everybody needs. Any questions? Okay, so I hope your brain's not swirling too much. If you have a bit of a headache, good. People who work with me know that if you don't have a headache at the end of my sessions, I'm not fully satisfied. I want to wish you all a lot of luck. I'm very appreciative that you found the time to come to this webinar, and I hope that it was worth your time. And we will be in touch with you after this webinar, sending you a link to where you can access the recording. We will also be sharing a quick survey with you because it's very, very important for us to keep our fingers to the pulse and to make sure that what we are doing for you is actually most valuable, whether it's the length of the webinar, the timing, the day of the week, or the content itself. And I would greatly appreciate it if you were able to answer that, because that's really the best way for us to continue creating value for you. And with that said, I bid you all farewell, unless I missed some questions in the chat. No. Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Ariel.
Thank you, Ariel.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.